everybody, and thank you for joining me at my session today where we're going to be talking about AI in logistics and specifically how AI and labor management is utilized to drive profitability and performance in a warehouse organization. So a little bit about myself. I'm Randall, Mr. Fulfillment, better known as. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, specifically in the direct consumer line of work. I started my own company back in 2016, where I then diversified into more of an omni-channel 3PL to do more business to business, direct consumer, a whole bunch of different type of commodities. And through that journey, while I was looking for a better technology stack and a better platform to operate my business on, is where I actually stumbled across ShipHero. And it was very instrumental in being able to grow my business efficiently, effectively, and profitably. And those are all the tools that we are going to be talking about today, is how to leverage the AI and the labor management tools provided by ShipHero to help drive that performance and profitability within the warehouse organization. So to really jump right into it, imagine this time next year, it's estimated that there's going to be over 1 million robots operating in U.S. warehouses. And that's primarily going to be driven by organizations like Walmart, Amazon, large enterprise warehouse distribution centers. But at the same tune, there has been nearly $80 billion spent on warehouse labor, even with that adoption of automation and robotics. And the interesting part about that is nearly 55% of most warehouse labor is spent on picking orders, pulling product out of the locations, getting them ready to go out the door. And during that picking process, up to 70% of a picker's day is just spent walking. Whether that's to grab the cart, to grab a stack of orders, walking from location to location to location. And it's during this process that most warehouses will easily bleed 12 to 15% of their entire revenues just on unnecessary steps. And if we do the math, that's nearly $5 billion that is wasted just on inefficient picking and poor labor management, which just erodes your profit margins with every wasted step. So that's what we're going to be talking about, is how to mitigate that and leverage AI tools and proper labor management to gain that profitability back and put it back into your business to continue working for you. So the thing every warehouse employs is the backbone of their operation, a WMS. And traditionally, warehouses will still have a certain level of manual intervention when it comes to order batching to get pick batches and pick waves ready to go to the team to actually do the work with that. And some of the things that are limiting is the way that warehouses will operate and choose to process those batches in the most efficient way possible. And that's generally where they will produce batches either by brand or product type. You will configure order batches based on the client if you're operating as a 3PL, or possibly the order configuration. And that is where these methods will generally ignore the physical layout of the warehouse space. And that is where a lot of the inefficiency starts to open up, is just due to the nature of how batches are processed and how the physical inventory is laid out in the warehouse space. And that creates almost a perpetual cycle where, to create efficiencies in the picking process, a lot of warehouses that I see will slot products either by brand or by commodity type, whether they're oversized or lightweight, and then that forces them to create picking waves and picking batches to make that process a little bit more efficient so they aren't wasting time walking around the entirety of the warehouse. But secondly, when it comes to it, after the waves and batches are processed, a lot of traditional WMSs will still require you to pre-print picking lists or the labels ahead of time, which then opens the door for the employees that are responsible for picking to do what they commonly do, and they will start cherry picking the easiest orders. They will thumb through them to find the ones that they want to work on to help boost their metrics. If they know that they can pick a wave a lot easier on aisles A and B rather than all the way across the warehouse, that's what they're going to do. They're going to spend their time trying to selectively choose which batches they're going to be working on, which again just wastes more time throughout the day of the picking process rather than allowing them to get to work and having systems and technology do that thinking for them. And as unintended as these consequences are, they are real. That by the time the picker actually goes to the station and grabs their pick tickets, they're going to start going to that first location if they don't get distracted and start talking to another associate or going on a water break, a restroom break, whatever it may be. But by the time they actually get the list of orders they're going to be picking to arrive to that first location, I mean, you could easily evaporate 10 to 15 minutes worth of time just in between because of poor labor management and not seeing who's actually working on what and how long they've been on those tasks. So those are the things that we are going to be talking about today, is how to progress through that and minimize those productivity gaps so there isn't as much downtime in between, and providing your managers with better tools and better insight to be able to do their jobs more effectively. Give me 1 second. So really, as warehouse operators, if we are going to make substantive change and meaningful improvements, we really need to focus on the two main drivers that correlate to productivity and performance. First one is the work. What are the employees actually doing? And secondly is the workforce. We need to streamline that job allocation and have visibility on who's where, doing what, to be able to manage that performance to motivate our teams more effectively. And today we're going to be addressing both of those problems with one integrated solution that ShipHero provides. The first is going to be our AI-driven picking. And what that is an intelligent software layer that is built into our platform. And in order for that to work, the first key piece of technology that we need to create and develop in partnership with the warehouse is a digital warehouse blueprint. It's essentially the map, a high-fidelity digital twin of your warehouse layout. And it's going to provide us that data that we need on the size, the spacing, and the locations of all available products and pickable SKUs within the facility. And this really is the crucial key that is used to turn on your warehouse superpowers. And once we have the warehouse map, our AI can algorithmically group orders together to create more efficient and more intelligent picking batches. And it's going to be referencing things like the purchase frequency. How often is that item sold, and how many times is your picker going to need to go to that location to grab the required amount of products to complete that batch. And it's also looking at product combinations. What SKUs are commonly sold together as a bundle? It's very common for e-com merchants to sell products as a bundle to increase their average order value. And so our system is looking at that, of not only how many products are needing to be pulled from which locations, but which products are commonly shipped together to create that map of the most efficient picking route. The other key it's going to be looking at is the actual location. Once we have that map, like I said, that tells us the size and the spacing between locations, now it can also tell us what product lives where to determine that most effective route. So something that would normally take a human or a person that's responsible for doing this job several hours to accomplish this same type of a task is now done virtually in seconds automatically, which makes every trip into the warehouse as dense and efficient as possible. So now that we know what groups of orders we are going to be picking and where the individual products actually live within the warehouse, the system can calculate that distance between each location. And like I'd mentioned, the picker, they grab their cart, they grab their equipment, go to the first location, right? And traditionally, the S pattern is how most picking is handled day to day. They'll start at the first location, which is that first graphic that you can see on the screen, and they will weave in and out all of the aisles to hit location after location after location until they get to the final one to complete that picking batch and then drop that cart of orders at the packing station. But with path optimization, this is where the system knows the distance between the locations that you're going to go to and will allow you to reach those destinations quicker in the fewest steps, rather than if you were simply to continue on that S path. It may have you backtrack out of that aisle that you're in to then loop around to go to that subsequent location. And that is where, once we've tested and implemented these changes within our own facilities, with little to no disruption in the existing process, we see on average a 30 to 50% reduction in the picker travel time and about a 40% increase in order throughput. And these aren't just theoretical gains. These are consistent results that we're seeing, that our clients are seeing, that are achievable when you leverage the right tools to assist in that process and kind of take the guesswork out of it. And you're no longer having to rely on manually processing batches on a outdated order configuration that requires the human intervention of it. But beyond leveraging AI picking, that is only half of the equation. We still need to plug in the most important piece. And like I'd mentioned earlier, if you don't have robotics and automation in your warehouse, that piece is the human element. And I did say earlier that the labor that warehouses spend clocks in at the tune of $80 billion, which means that your people are both your greatest asset, but also your biggest expense in operating your warehouse, which makes proper management decisions essential to maximizing productivity and profitability. Now, the optimization engine doesn't just create efficient paths, it generates powerful and objective data on which employees are working on what tasks, exactly how long they've been on those tasks, and who's leading that team in productivity performance. Essentially what it is a data gold mine, a management gold mine to empower your supervisors and your managers to make much more efficient decisions when it comes to how they are going to allocate resources throughout the day and which tasks they should be putting people on. Now, commonly, warehouses have dealt with these complexities of people and project management by adopting more of a fragmented technology stack, okay? And this can mean, one specialized application is specifically used for payroll and time tracking. That could be a third-party application if you outsource that type of a thing, where another plug-and-play application could be used for project management, how to optimize your special projects, your assemblies, your work orders, and any of those other special tasks that you have. And even further still, another layer of complexity would be a labor management or a performance metric tool that needs to be plugged in on top of that. Where if you are measuring those metrics, now it's going to take an insane amount of time to actually extract and compile that data to turn it into something that is usable and actionable. And this can often lead to significant inefficiencies or data silos that do not paint the holistic picture of what the warehouse operation actually is. And the time and effort that it does require to manually reconcile this data it vacuums up too much time of the warehouse management and the warehouse leadership to take away from their day to make informed and effective decisions, which can impact your operational agility and your ability to respond effectively to the dynamic warehouse environments that we all operate in. And this is where ShipHero's native solution comes into play. It is Workforce Hero is what we call it, and it is a solution that provides real-time visibility into your warehouse team's activities, their task assignments. It monitors time tracking and provides productivity analysis. And the first tool that we have in this application suite is the Live View. This is essentially your bird's eye view. If you take kind of a 20,000 foot view looking down at the warehouse, it gives you all of that insight of who is working where. And unless you are operating in a warehouse that is under 20,000 square feet with 5 or fewer employees, it is virtually impossible to tell at any given time what employee is working on what specific task. They may be all the way across the floor just sitting on a pallet somewhere and not being productive, but you really wouldn't know if you don't have physical eyes on them. And this is where this tool really comes into play, is it not only gives you those insights of who is on what particular job, but it gives you the ability to customize what jobs are relevant to your specific operation. It does provide defaults for order picking, multi-item batch, single item batches, receiving, inventory tasks, but you can also customize it for things that are relevant to your specific operation. And while the system's intelligent auto-detect function will automatically move people from job to job based on their interaction with the system. So if they are going to start the day on picking, but then halfway through they move to packing, once they log in to the packing station using their PIN, the system will identify and auto-detect that and move their job from picking over to packing without any intervention in between it. So you can start to have a lot more precise data and control over the exact time that your employees are spending on any given task. Beyond that, for those of you that do special projects, kitting work, assembly work, any of those types of things, the Workforce Hero tool gives you the ability to create custom jobs for that particular work. So you're no longer having to track the time manually or using stopwatches and spreadsheets. If you have 3 associates working on a particular task, have them scan that QR code and automatically that clock starts tracking the time that those specific individuals spend on that exact job, which can then automate that entire process of pulling those hours out of that work to put into the invoice that you were going to send to your client if you're operating as a 3PL, or give you better data insights if you are operating your own warehouse as a brand. Now, as managers, when under time-critical pressure, it's this ability to quickly shift personnel around and keep the team on pace to allocate the resources to those higher priority tasks that really can make all the difference in not only hitting your performance targets and performance metrics, but also keeping payroll in check. And that's really what we are trying to do, is drive that profitability, because otherwise, unless we are operating as a nonprofit warehouse, profitability is what we are all striving for. It's one thing to have good revenues, but if our profitability doesn't keep pace, we're just spinning our wheels, exerting a lot more effort without the reward on the back end. And that kind of leads into the second piece of it, is how do we actually track and measure that performance? The Workforce Hero will track the time and tell us exactly who's working on what and how long they've been there. But how do we actually track that, right? Well, that's kind of where this KPI conundrum comes into play, right? Are the metrics that we use as warehouses actually fair and unbiased to give us the data that we need to make those types of informed decisions? For pickers and packers in particular, I mean, how many people here in the audience use KPIs of some sort of like orders per hour, picks per hour, item per hour? Just raise the hands. Anybody use those metrics? Yeah, we all typically do, right? But are those metrics actually fair? Do they give us the true information we need to make those educated decisions? And I would dare say, no, they typically don't. Because the thing about it is orders per hour can entirely depend on the type of orders that the packer gets. And like I'd mentioned earlier, if the pickers or packers have the ability to selectively choose which batches of orders they're picking or which orders they're going to be packing, oftentimes, and I see it time and time again in warehouse operations, they're going to pick the orders that are going to pad their statistics, that are going to pad their metrics. It's way easier to pack a batch of 50 single item orders than it is to pack a batch of 50 multi-item orders. Same thing if they are going in a bubble mailer versus a box, or things that require additional void fill materials can greatly skew those productivity metrics that we traditionally use to track and monitor that performance. And same thing on the picking side, right? Picking 50 items of a product out of aisle 1 in 2 to 3 locations or 2 to 3 bays is going to be significantly different than picking 50 items across 4 or 5 aisles out of 7 to 12 to 15 different bays. So not only are traditional KPIs and performance metrics kind of outdated, but it really doesn't give us the true insights onto who the performance leaders and productivity leaders are within the organization. And that is what kind of brings us to the second tool within the Workforce Hero suite, which is our performance dashboard. And this really is a powerful and intelligent application that compares actual time on task against AI's calculated optimal time in which that task should be completed. So for packers, as an example, these aren't just generalized assumptions that the AI says, hey, this is how long an order should take to get packed. It actually is uniquely trained to measure the calculated performance based on that exact order configuration's complexity. And whether that is by client or brand, it's taking that into consideration, and whether or not this identical type of order has been packed before, or if it's just a similar type of order with a similar quantity of products. And this really takes the guesswork out of these performance metrics to then rate them on a score of 1 through 10, where a 5 right in the middle means that that packer is performing at the anticipated rate that that exact order configuration should have taken to be completed. If they are less than a 5, that means they are under that performance objective. If they're above it, obviously they're doing better than what the AI calculates should have taken to get that order packed. And this is what really can make the difference for your management team when you're going through doing performance reviews and holding the team accountable to our KPIs. We can really start to drill down with this information to inquire about whether or not this is an actual people problem. Do we have the right person on the task, or are they just kind of dragging their feet? If we know that, hey, they are typically one of our better performers, well, let's start to dig in further. Maybe this is a equipment problem. Maybe there is something that needs to change within the layout of the pack station to make that task a little easier. And simple things of height difference of your packers. If somebody is a little bit shorter trying to reach a top shelf where a box might be, just that extra time to reach those materials could slow that process down, which we can then weigh into that conversation about whether or not we need to modify the equipment that the employees are using to accomplish their jobs. And if it's not people or the equipment, maybe it's just simply a process-driven problem that we need to fix in the way that that type of order configuration is actually handled. Now, on the flip side, the picker performance dashboard provides a lot of this same insight and a lot of the same details that's similar to the packer performance. That picker performance score accounts for what type of batch that employee is going to be working on, whether it's a single item batch or a multi-item batch, the quantity of units that they are expected to pick, and where those locations actually are. So again, it takes that cherry picking ability out of the equation altogether, and it will create an objective score based on the assumed number of steps and the distance in between location 1 to location 2, how many items need to be pulled out of each of those bins to calculate an objective score that picking job should have been accomplished in. So it really does give you that unbiased opinion, the unbiased information that you need to make better and more informed decisions on how you motivate your team and reward that level of performance, where leveraging this AI is how we create true objectivity to build incentive programs that are directly tied to performance against an AI-defined standard, which ensures fairness in motivating your team across the board. Where typically if we just look at kind of a top packer performance or a top picker performance that doesn't take into consideration the nuances and the intricacies of what that task actually is, we could be celebrating, our top packer, our top picker, when really they're just padding their stats, like I said, by picking the easiest orders to pick or choosing the easiest orders to pack, because they know that, hey, if I'm going to be getting a bonus, if I'm going to be getting rewarded for this type of performance, I'm going to find the easiest way to cheat the system to go about doing that. And so really that's kind of where these AI tools come into play, is to help you guys take that personal bias or the cheating the system out of the equation to create those objectified scores. And once we begin to really have this dialed in is where the AI optimization comes into play, and it creates this flywheel effect of perpetual improvement where the AI starts to optimize the work, creating additional efficiencies, not only from a order batching of selecting the right orders that should be grouped together, but then the picking path of the shortest distance between those locations to get those batches picked in the shortest amount of time and distance as possible, which then ties into the data that is extracted out of that and empowers your managers to coach, to reward, to create incentive programs to continue to drive further performance and further improvements, which then continues to drive more improved performance that can feed back into the AI engine to continue to optimize this entire process. And so that's where leveraging these pieces together as an entire solution is what's going to make the difference to build a future-ready warehouse as robotics become more competitive, as automation becomes more integral to the entire warehouse operation. We can start to put these practices into place today to have better performance metrics and better outlooks for what the future is going to hold. And so these is kind of what I wanted to recap on, is that to create a scalable, resilient, and future-ready warehouse, logistics and fulfillment operations really have to embrace this early technology and leverage their workforce efficiently, leaning into the three main areas that I talked about. Is first, the AI intelligence, the order batching, which again automatically identifies and creates these order batches, taking any of that guesswork and the human error out of that equation. It really cuts that time not in half, but automates it almost instantaneously, where when your employees come into work, they can immediately grab their iPads, grab the scanners, select the status they're going to be working on, and the system spits out the orders that they are going to be picking, and it provides them a map with a path to make that happen as quick as possible, which is the second key for the picker travel, the path optimization. Making sure that they are not guessing or following a traditional S pattern to go through the entire warehouse, just wasting steps, wasting dollars, evaporating margin with every additional step. Let AI tackle that. It will definitely do a far better job than most humans are ever going to be capable of doing. And the third pillar is going to be leveraging the AI data for the objective, normalized metrics and proper labor management to empower those decisions to make better improved decisions, to help drive that pace, drive the momentum forward, and continue to have this perpetual cycle of improvements and efficiencies. And this strategy does enable warehouses to handle those fluctuating daily demands, to manage predictable growth, and ultimately build a more efficient and profitable operation, which is especially important this time of year as we go into peak season. Most warehouses will easily see a 30, 40, if not 50% increase in order volumes. And what do we typically do as warehouse operators to account for that? Right? We start hiring more people earlier on. We recruit temp agencies to fill those labor gaps. And the thing about that is when you bring on additional labor or rely on temp agencies to fill some of those gaps, you don't really have the luxury of time on your side. There is an inherent level of orientation and training on your specific operation, on the nuances of the job that they are going to be doing. And if they haven't worked in that warehouse environment, if they aren't familiar with your layout, if they aren't familiar with the processes specific to your operation, it's just going to be such an inefficient process that, yes, while we are getting additional order volumes, while productivity is happening, it's that delta between our actual revenues versus our profitability that just starts to grow bigger and bigger the more orders that you throw on it. The more people that you bring into the organization, the more perpetuated those problems can become. And that's where traditionally, right, we just kind of muscle through it and power through it and throw more people at the problem. And then because we have more people, we have to add additional layers of middle management to manage those people, to manage those additional teams. All this while, we're kind of ignoring the fundamental issues that maybe we should be leveraging technology. Maybe there are tools that could help take that guesswork and take the manual intervention out of this process where going into peak season, maybe we don't need to hire an additional 20 to 30% staff. If we employ the right tools and the right technology to assist us, and we can see those type of results of 40% more output with the same staff that we already had, now we can start to really close that gap between the revenue that we're generating and the profitability that we are expecting, because we're allowing the AI engines to do that work, to take the guesswork out of it, to create more efficient processes, the picking paths within the warehouse to capture that additional profitability, which is what we are all trying to achieve at the end of the day. So I know I do have a couple of minutes left to open it up to a Q&A. If anybody did have any questions about how ShipHero can help your warehouse organization, we do have a booth over here that we got a couple of guys sitting there that we would be happy to have conversations with you to discuss these things about where you're currently at, what goals and objectives you're trying to accomplish, and how ShipHero may be leveraged to help you reach those goals.